been developing this approach for almost 7 years now in the Netherlands. We wrote 2, unfortunately, Dutch books about it, and in the middle is my dissertation on the natural mentoring approach, which we eventually also wrote some kind of structure. We don't like to call it a protocol because that's too rigid, but it's more like a structure social workers can use to work with this approach in their own situation. We call it the context, because sometimes this approach in the Netherlands is used, for example, in foster care, but sometimes it's used with homeless youth. I think you can relate to that more. All kinds of situations and applications also on school. And we say, well, we have these guidelines, these principles. You can use them in any way with any target population, because you are the expert of this context. You know how this idea will evolve in your given situation, in the context, and all the questions that rise. We are developing this in the Netherlands, but also now in Belgium, in Ireland. And it's really interesting that, especially in Ireland, there is a whole different care situation compared to the Netherlands. So that's really helpful to develop further. We are collaborating with colleagues from the United States. Professor Gene Rhodes has been doing a lot of research on the topic of mentoring. So that's also really stimulating that due to the combination of research and practice, we have access to the knowledge from the scientific community, but also from the community of practitioners. And we combine these two, and well, the resulted in these books. As I mentioned, youth-initiated mentoring is also personal, and that's how it also started for me. When I was 29, I'm now 38, so almost 10 years ago. I was married quite young. I was raised as a Christian. My father is a reverend, and I was 29. You could say stuck in a marriage I wasn't comfortable with anymore, and that was really difficult for me. I was at the point of the discussion: do we want to try to have children, etc., etc.? How will our future see, etc., etc.? And I felt this is not the good relationship for me. But with my family, my parents, my mother, I have one brother, 3 sisters, I couldn't really discuss this topic because of the Christian background. They had the idea, well, you are married right now, and this is what it will be for the rest of your life. And I felt really uncomfortable with it, and I could discuss this with Han. Han Mes is a Dutch painter. I met her as the parent of a youngster. I offered some guidance and support. Her son had learning ability, but also suffered from psychosis. And as a social worker, I supported him. That was at the age of 19. So I already knew her for 10 years, and we developed a huge, you could say, a rich connection. And I could discuss this issue with her. She could relate to my feeling of uncomfortableness with this relation, also this age period, 29, and then already feeling stuck in your life. How do you deal with it? And to me, that was really refreshing, and it really helped to look with another perspective at this difficult situation for me. I was 29. I also worked for 2-3 years, and I was asked by the company I worked for to come up with a new solution for youth that were placed out of home. In the Netherlands, we place youngsters for 9 months, almost a year, out of home, with the idea that at this remote location we can offer them guidance and support, we can offer them therapy, and after 9 months, 1 year, they can go back to their family, and then they are cured. That's the idea, and maybe you already see that I'm a bit skeptical about the idea. All kinds of literature say, well, it's not working or it's not sufficiently working. But also my personal experience as a social worker, I saw that it's not helping youth. They are surrounded by other youngsters, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, and they learn how to deal drugs, they learn how to use drugs. They hear even more worse stories than they are learning at school. So it's more like a toxic environment, and it's negative for them. That was my unease with the situation, based on the scientific literature, but also based on my own experience as a social worker. And that moment in time, I was 29, I experienced myself that I had a difficult situation at home. I could not discuss it with my parents, but I could discuss it with Han. And that was the moment that I thought, well, if I have this person in my own environment, why doesn't this 14-year-old, 16-year-old have the same person? Why is he not having this kind of relationship outside his family? Because that's a difficult situation right now. But is there someone he or she trusts? And could we as social workers help him reach out to this person? Could we help him to deepen the bond he already has with this person? So that was the basic idea and experience, and that was where also the journey started. I investigated this whole idea of what is called in the literature natural mentoring. It's placed on the opposite of formal mentoring. Formal mentoring is, these are relationships that are established through programs, with mostly volunteers. So these are people who say, well, I want to be supportive for a young community member, but they don't know this community member yet. And they are matched through a formal program to each other, and then the relationship starts. On the opposite, we have natural mentoring. This is an organically formed relationship between a youngster and someone he trusts. And it can be an uncle, it can be a sports coach, it can be a teacher. These are community members already from this person. Well, if you look at the access youngsters have, 75% of youngsters asked, do you have some kind of supportive person within your network besides your parents? They say yes. Yes, I have this person. It's spontaneously they say it. 7% of the population is matched with formal mentoring. So if you compare these two, then we put a lot of efforts in this formal mentoring approach. We try to match community members with youngsters. We need to recruit the community members, so we have big flyers and commercials, campaigns running to recruit the formal mentors. But all these efforts and all the money spent in these efforts, it only reached 7%. So we thought we need to look more into this idea of natural mentoring. What is the benefit of natural mentoring? We conducted a meta-analysis in which we looked at more than 60,000 youngsters, and they were asked, do you have this person? They answered the question with yes, and if they did, 12% of their overall well-being could be explained by this relationship. It also impacted social, emotional, psychological problems, physical health, and school success. So it has a huge benefit on their life. We also looked at more in detail if they said, yes, I have this mentor, and if they also said, I like the contact with this mentor, I have a good relationship with this mentor, the relationship quality is very good, then the impact doubled, 24%. So that was huge. And then we thought, well, maybe these are all the youngsters, the 75% of the youngsters reached. These are the youngsters that have supportive networks. And of course, the 25% of the youngsters not being reached with this natural mentoring approach, well, they are probably the youngsters we are working with. Homeless youth, youth in foster care, suffering from psychological problems, etc. We conducted an analysis to look at this, and it was not the case. The results are both for youngsters having a rich and supportive networks, but they are also for these youngsters with a disadvantaged background. So what we said is, well, the availability of the natural mentors, that's a given fact. But you also have to look at the relationship quality. You need this good relationship, and of course you need access. And if you combine these two, then it could be beneficial for youth. This is the one article I already saw this morning in the SharePoint, so you can just look at it, because I wrote an article about this untapped potential of natural mentoring. We are not using this potential yet. That's why we thought, is it possible that in a more structured program, we incorporate this idea of natural mentoring, and that we support social workers to reach out to families and ask them, do you know this person? Do you know a person from your own network, from your own community, that could be supportive in this period of time, in this difficult situation? And we started, together with Els, we started with families who are at the threat for out-of-home placement. So it was really difficult situations in which the child protection services said, well, the situation at home is not safe anymore. This child should be placed out of home. And we asked Child Protection Service and other co-workers, can we please start with the question, who is the one person you as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old trust? Who is this person? Do you dare to reach out to this person? And can we ask this person, what is it that we should do? That's the first phase. We call it the who phase. And I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the Netherlands, normally a social worker approach a family with the second phase, which is focused on what is the situation here? It's more like a diagnostic phase. What is each perspective? What needs to be done? What is the situation at home, in the neighborhood, at school, etc. We said, well, we can't understand what is the current situation if we do not have this person, this natural mentor, this self-chosen mentor, sitting at the table besides the youngster, supporting him in telling what are the struggles you are suffering with. What is the difficulty at home, in your community, at school? So that's a radical shift from our perspective. I don't know how it is in your situation, but in the Netherlands, this was a radical shift. So we shifted from not start with a deep dive in the current situation, but start with asking, who do you support? And after that, the third phase is more about how. What can we do? Which kind of therapeutical advices or home challenges, work challenges, situations at school do we need to tackle so you can proceed without the support of these social workers? And then the last phase 4 is focused on adaptivity, because from our perspective, the situations these families have to deal with each day, again and again, we cannot solve it. But we can learn them to be more adaptive. We can learn them to reach out to the network and to be more resilient to all the challenges they experience. But we should not have the idea that we can solve anything like we had when we put the youngster for 6 months, 9 months at this remote location and put it back to the family again, so-called cured. We don't believe in this curing model. We believe more in this idea of resilience and adaptivity. This is the approach we developed, and we started working with it. And of course, we encountered all kinds of challenges. Els can explain more about it. But we also, last year, we also looked at the results. This youth-initiated mentoring approach, is it beneficial? We conducted a meta-analysis, again, a meta-analysis. We all looked for different kinds of applications of this youth-initiated mentoring. And we looked, does it indeed, is it beneficial for youth? Youth-initiated mentoring has different applications. It's focused on school dropouts, suicidal ideation, prevention of out-of-home placement, foster care, first-generation college students, and delinquent youth. So it is, you could all, I don't know if you are familiar with the prevention classification, but it's more like a, it's not like a universal preventive strategy, this youth-initiated mentoring. It's more like a TED-chair prevention strategy. So it's more focused on youth who really indeed need support. Because it's a combination of searching for this youth-initiated mentor, but also offering guidance and support from social worker, a psychiatrist, psychologist, etc. So these two worlds are combined. The results were quite positive. These are just some numbers. I'll explain them. It's G.30 and G.40. If you compare it to the normal mentoring approach, it's higher. But as you also compare it, for example, to a cognitive behavioral therapy, that's most of the time 0.10, 0.20. So this approach has a huge potential. Of course, we need to research it better, etc., etc. But we say, especially given the population we serve, the impact is enormous. And we think that it is because of this combination of professionals collaborating with this youth-initiated mentoring. A forthcoming opinion piece from me and colleagues is this one. I'll send it to you afterwards. It's in the JAMA Psychiatry. It's more about how can we use this approach, youth-initiated mentoring, also given this time in the COVID-19 crisis. As you may know, the burden on youth is rising. The mental health issues they experience are tremendous in this situation. And we think that for the coming years, we will see the impact on the mental health part, especially for youth. And our mental health services in the Netherlands, but also in the United States, it's not doable. They can't provide every youngster. So we say we need to search for a more scalable approach, and we suggest youth-initiated mentoring. This is the last research I want to explain. This is more about program staff that are used to work with normal mentoring, so the formal mentoring approach, and they are shifting it to the youth-initiated mentoring approach. And they were asked, well, why did you make this shift? How did you experience making this shift? What are your ideas and your first insights? So it's really helpful, especially for social workers or other program facilities that are trying to make the shift, and what will professionals encounter? Well, first they looked at why did they decide to implement this approach. And it's interesting that most of them, also with 30 years of experience, they said, well, in my opinion, this should be the first stop anyway. But somehow we have been forgotten this potential that's just out there. We started with making the match, making the recruitment, because someone asked, can you support me with a mentor? And we immediately searched our database for a good connection, but why didn't we just start asking this youngster, all right, you want to have a mentor, do you have a mentor in your own environment? So that's interesting that even professionals with 30 years of experience, when they reflect, they think, well, this should have been our first stop anyway. Well, when they started to implementing it, that was also difficult. Because of the part of the youth had negative beliefs about their own social network. So they did not have the idea that they had this natural mentor, this person within their environment. It's not that it's true or not true, they just have this idea, and yeah, you have to encounter it. But also there was a discussion between the family and the program staff about the eligibility of adults. Some families said, well, we think our uncle, sport coach, is a good mentor, but the program staff had their doubts. And yeah, that's of course a difficult situation. When a family says, well, this is the person we trust, and you as a formalized program staff stimulated them to ask this question, and then you are saying, well, I don't know if this is a good person. That's of course a difficult situation. What they found related to the match support is that the staff members said, well, it's the strong connection is striking to see how rapidly it is developed, and that's of course, yeah, that's the whole idea, that this connection is already there and that you only have to expand it. But these members were used, these program staff members were used to really invest in creating these relationships, sometimes for a period of 3 or 6 months. And then after this period of making the connection, getting to know each other, then the real program could start. But first it was focused on making these connections. And now this 3 or 6 month period of time, it was gone. It was just gone because they already had the connection. They also saw that the mentors were less nervous and more responsible. So that was interesting for them, but also a little bit uncomfortable, because they said, well, normally we are highly involved in making this good connection and supporting youth and mentor to make this connection. But now, yeah, we don't have to do that, because the mentor feels more of a responsibility for a family member or a community member, etc. Well, this is all more theoretically. So as the last part, I would like to show you a short video of Saad. He's one of the youngsters who were asked, can you nominate this natural mentor from within your environment? And he explains what are, from his perspective, the benefits of this natural mentoring.
De voordelen aan een gym. Oh jee, maakt niet uit, oké wel. Waarom je als jongere een gym zou willen hebben? Het is dat je zelf mag uitkiezen. Het gevoel hebben dat je gewoon de eigen regie hebt over je leven is voor jongeren heel belangrijk. Tenminste, dat was het voor mij ook. Daarnaast is het geen vreemde. Dus die persoon kent je door en door, weet hoe je in elkaar steekt. Weet wat je nodig hebt. Wanneer jij zelf niet weet hoe je het moet zeggen voor jezelf, weet jouw gym dat meestal wel. En daarnaast is het alsof je gewoon een familielid bij krijgt. Voor mij dan was het zeg maar momenten dat je ouders of iemand zeg maar, van de hulpverlening jou niet kon ondersteunen, kon de gym dat wel voor mij.
What I really like about the explanation of Saad is that it's also related to the self-determination theory. I don't know if you're familiar with that from Ryan and Daisy, but he says that at the basis for each person, it doesn't matter a youngster, adult, disadvantaged, etc. Each person to become motivated to take new action, to develop. There are 3 basic principles: autonomy, competentness, and relatedness. So you need to have the idea, I can make this choice, and Saad explains that idea of autonomy, I'm the one who's choosing. It's also about the competency. He also gets the idea that he is able to do this, that he is able to make a good decision with reaching out to this person. And it also is focusing on relatedness. He says, well, to me, it was like expanding my family. So he feels more connected within his community.